Hey guys, it's time for another edition of On Social, the show that talks about everything that has to do with live video on social platforms in a professional manner. Today I am joined by the two-time Emmy Award winner, Mr. Jeffrey Fitzgerald. Yeah, that you're not going to live that down. That we're going with that.
Well, it never gets old. It's a
It never
great
gets
thing to
old.
hear, but at the same time, I am starting to get a little sick of it, so
Well, I'll remove it for next week off the lower third.
yeah, that'll be good.
But
You
you
know
have
what? Let me win a Whammy or something or, something like that. Tony Award winning on Broadway, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just you and I today. Marty is out and about. He is in Chicago this week. So he
Good
will be
deal.
joining us next week. So that'll be cool. But one of the things we wanted to talk about today is this on-site broadcasting, and I know you have been doing a lot of that recently. As if people don't know that you do, like contracting with different churches, schools, businesses, government agencies, where you go in and basically you set up their live broadcasting. And I think people sometimes don't understand what they're getting into when they try to do on-site broadcasting, and sometimes they don't know the questions that they need to ask to go on site. And I was hoping that you and I could kind of shed a little bit of light
Sure.
on some of the things that, like when you go into an event, like tomorrow you have one with a church. What is one of the first things that you ask them when you start consulting with them for setting up their live broadcast on location?
Well, whether it's a church or whether it's doing an annual, a meeting event as I used to as when I was employed with, one of the heart associations, I always like to start with what is your why? I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek, and he's the guy that really coined the phrase "What's your why?" You have to really understand the reason why you're doing what you're doing, because I think in the streaming world, especially, it seems to me that so many people are talking like, "Hey, let's do video, and we need a video." But video is just a bowl. It's just a placeholder, just like streaming is. And if you don't know what you're going to put into it, you can send it out to the netherworld and you may never get a response. You may never get a viewer. So a lot of it really comes back to why are you doing what you're doing? What is it you really want to communicate? What are the main takeaways that you want to give the people who are watching? And then what do you want them to do with that information? And so for me, that's really number one is you got to start with why.
Asking that why question. I know sometimes when I've gone into different places, not necessarily churches, but when people have asked, to live stream a training, like I had a concrete company, they had to do a training for OSHA, where they do every year. The OSHA person comes out and they do like an 8-hour seminar, and I had to go in there. They wanted it live streamed because they had some guys that were on location in other areas of the state that they couldn't make it back for that training, and they wanted to not only stream it to their local employees, but they also wanted it archived. And when I told them that for 8 hours it was going to cost them $1,000, they kind of like, well, we have somebody there that'll do it with their phone, so we're going to kind of pass on that.
Yeah.
But
The Yeah, it's the biggest advance in technology we've ever seen for video, and at the same time, it can be the biggest, nightmare if you're not
yeah,
careful with it. The big thing to understand about an iPhone and why that while they do work, there's no doubt about it, we see people doing it all the time. They're good for close proximity conversations and interviews and selfies and one-offs and things like that, but they've got a lens on them that, there's different ones today that have different focal lengths and things, but by and large, they're 25 millimeters, somewhere in there. It's a wide shot, not quite a fisheye, but it's certainly not anything close. And you learn this when you want to take a picture of that nice big harvest moon, the full moon we had here recently, and you aim it up in the sky,
yep.
and the moon to you is this big, and then all of a sudden you get a little white dot, and you're like, "What happened?" Well, the camera's not really designed to get in that close, and so with mobile technology, you got to really think about how you're going to do it. I was in a situation with an enterprise company 3 years ago, who was doing this very thing. Their thing was we want to save money, and we want to put our best foot forward and do videos from they rented I think it was the Atlanta venue, this giant venue. They spent millions of dollars all year long getting ready for this great conference to introduce all these great products. And then they want to stream with their phones. And I'm like, why would you chop that part of the line item, instead of investing in that to make it look like TV, make it look where people can see up close, all of that. So
Well,
they started out we want to do 3 camera interviews, Steve, and you know what it means? It means that the phone has to be 2 foot,
Yeah,
3 foot
it's
away.
gonna be, like, right in your
Like a
face.
moving shot. And so you can imagine kinda where that went. It wasn't what they thought it was gonna be.
But you know what, Jeff? A lot of people say content is king. Content is everything, and I kinda piggy that back with consistency, but when it comes to something like this, if you're dealing with you're going on site. You're taking the time. Obviously, you're charging the client to go on site like you're doing tomorrow, whether the first half hour is free. I don't know how you work it, and it's not something you need to disclose. But the consultation, a lot of times guys do like a 15-minute free consultation over the phone, but then they go and they go to site. And I think a lot of companies and a lot of churches, businesses, whatever, they're taken back when you tell them cell phones and iPads aren't the way to go to stream your service. Listen, if you're in a pinch, pull out that cell phone and get it going. But if you're going to do this right and you you want to give people a good viewing experience, I'm even going back to that thing with OSHA, they could have had a really nice archive for employees years to
That's exactly
come
right.
had they gone with a more professional video than a cell phone and the built-in microphone. And granted, these microphones are good, they just it's hard to hear. I mean, you get some older folks, they might not hear the audio as good as if it was coming through a
Yeah.
microphone or a
And
lavalier and
that's
some.
exactly it. You got a number of problems just even with audio because you don't have the ability to monitor it through an audio mixer to make sure that levels are equal with different people when they speak. You don't have the ability many times if there's an issue to kind of figure out where it's coming from because you don't have the chain in front of you where you can kind of know that if it's over here, okay, over here, then it must be over there. And it does, it introduces a lot of trouble. And audio is one of those things that is, you'll hear this from a lot of people that work in the industry. It is more important than video because if you and I sound great, and for some reason, I'm not in a shot that works for everybody, you can put a nice big picture of a bus or a bird or a flower or whatever it is,
Yep.
and you can cover it. But with audio, you can't do that. I mean, it'll sound like Darth Vader, and you're going to be Darth Vader for 30 seconds. And so
Yep.
there's issues that revolve around that, but there is a place for it, but it wasn't ever designed to take the place of doing it in a more meaningful way because there's three items that you've got to look at. It's the creative, the content, and the production, and all three of those, if they're strong, you're going to make your brand name for itself. There's going to be brand awareness and there's going to be brand authority. But if you're lacking any of those areas, it's going to be noticeable, and you're going to have a more weak product, I think.
So what do you do when you go into a client's area? What do you say to them after you get the why? Do you ask them, is bandwidth a priority for you when you're consulting with them to ask them what type of bandwidth that they have in the area and what type of quality that they're looking for? Is that something that people should be asking their clients first and foremost? I mean, I know for me that sounds like it's an important question to ask.
Oh, it's critical. For me, I wrote a couple things down. I start with the room itself and the space itself. I look at things like, are we near a bunch of windows, and do we have the ability to control the light in those windows? Because that light will affect what everything looks like inside. Sometimes somebody will go in there who hasn't really gone through the motions or the years as much, and they may say, "Hey, got a lot of great side lighting," but you're looking at it on a Tuesday when it's sunny outside, and then all of a sudden Friday you've got a dark thunderstorm that just rolled through, and everybody looks like they're in the foggy bottom of the Grippenmeyer
Yep.
with Sherlock Holmes. And so I try to isolate the lighting, especially out where I have total control of the lighting in some ways. I've even gone as far as running pipe and drape that are 16, 18 foot tall to really block any outside light coming in so that I can kind of get a bigger control of what that's going to look like. And so the room space itself is really important. Do you have the distance involved? Is it a great distance? Because you got to look at lens throw. How close can you get to someone? You walk into a ballroom and they say, we want to get this great, medium shot of our CEO, and you say, I can do that. Well, you got to have a camera that's got the ability to get in that close. Otherwise, you're going to have to say, hey, I need you to put a riser in the middle of the room halfway forward so that I can make up that distance and I'll still be able to do that. And, other things you may not even think about things. Speaking of risers, a lot of times when you're doing an event that the press is concerned about and they want to be there, the last 3 or 4 years, I didn't do it this year, but previously, I've been live streaming day conferences for March for Life and other advocacy organizations. And you'll have people hop up on with you with a camera real quick to take a photograph, or they'll bring a video camera. And they don't think about the fact that every time they're jumping on your platform, even if they're trying to be nice and
Right.
gentle, you're not getting an earthquake. So you got to have either a separate one for yourself or you got a cutaway. So there's things like that you need to be aware of. Bandwidth is actually for streamers. What is that? That's number one. That's the antenna. You got to have that. You need to find out if it's going to be a paid item because most AV hotels, they charge for that bandwidth. And if you don't have it, like you've got a live view, it's one of the things that's an option. You can do something like that with a bonded connection. But if you do, how far into the cement are you? The more inside the building you get, the less you're going to have the ability to connect to the, to the towers and those things. And so if you're not careful, it may look like a great option and you look at your phone, you got 2 bars, you're like, "I think I'm good."
Yeah.
Could be a whole different deal, but I mean, there's a number of those things we can go through.
Well, yeah,
Absolutely.
and I wanna kind of bring attention to the chat room here. I don't know if you've seen George Kennedy posted in there. He says, "Man, this is a major subject in my circles." He said, "Folks are pursuing the idea mobile devices are a big part of streaming future." And he goes on to say, "It's hard enough trying to keep a full blown production under control. Mobile adds too many more issues and complexities for his taste." And
Well,
he wants you to know he's allergic to the drapes and pipes too as well.
well, I love George Kennedy. We've never spoken, never met, but George, we need to do that. I know you're in the DC area, if I'm not mistaken. I am as well. I'm out in Western Loudoun County. This guy is somebody you should keep an eye on. He knows what he's doing. But it is because what it is it's the same problem we've got across the board in production. Everybody now says, "Hey, my phone does 4K. Why would I pay somebody with a fancy dolly and
You hear it
you
every
know the
day.
and it's so funny because in other areas where I'm working, and I do a lot of work in the strategic volunteer fire side with marketing and media, and the 2 Emmy awards were for a PSA that I did for North Carolina that brought in 700 people, and I was told by many people, "Hey, that really resonated in ways that others haven't." And I know what it was. It wasn't necessarily all of the cinematography, even though that was one of them. It was the fact it had a message that resonated with people. Nobody thinks about the creativity. They think about the shell. They think I can capture content, but they don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to package it in the right way. But part of that packaging is if you and I are having this conversation and I've got a green screen behind me, but if I go all the way back here and I'm way over here and I'm off mic and I'm saying, "Hey, it's really good to be here today, Steve. I just want you to know it's right." That's you get one impression of somebody when you do that. When I get up close a little bit more and I'm looking in the camera and I'm well lit and I'm saying, "This is something that you really need to do for the betterment of humanity. Please wash your hands." It has a whole different feel, right?
Yeah.
And so
You're
the
getting more
technology
personable.
exactly. You're right. The technology gets confused with the technique far too often, and you'll get these middle managers, people that think they're gonna save money, which why in the world would you go to an annual meeting and wanna save in the area of communication? I don't know, but that's where it usually
Well, isn't
happens.
that
So
like, if you go to school for marketing and different things like that, isn't communications part of your major? Like, don't they teach you how to communicate? I mean, I know I took communications
yeah.
in
Yeah,
college.
but
I mean, why would you wanna use
but the
a
difference is everybody's buying these $2,000, $1,000 devices, and they now think, "Oh my god, it can do anything." It can do anything, but it can't do everything, and I think that's the thing that everybody
yeah.
needs to understand. It doesn't mean it can't be used in pockets. If you're doing a live production, I used to work for the American College of Cardiology, and I launched a medical video channel for them in 2005, and we would go to our annual conference and do 62, 70 interviews in 4 days. I would have loved to have had the technology to have people out on the floor who connect to Wi-Fi and say, "Hey, John is with me now talking to Dr. Block. I would love to hear what you're having to say about this new cath procedure." That's a cool way of bringing it in to Wirecast, through Rendezvous or vMix or whatever it might be. But, the thing is that doesn't replace doing the other stuff, and I think that's where people get confused.
Well, and listen, I'm not opposed to I watch a lot of storm chasers on Weather Channel. I'm sure a lot of it you guys do, especially if if there's a tornado in your area or a major hurricane or something. And some of these guys are using their phones and they're getting some really cool footage
Oh,
from
absolutely.
from
Yeah.
the the hurricane just made land shore and people are but even there I'm looking for quality and they're getting good quality with it. I'm not taking away from it. There's times that's important, but when you're getting called out to do a remote on-site job as a producer, as George would probably tell you, as Jeff's telling you, you are going in there expecting they want to do a production. They don't want to do a rinky-dink cell phone uh, setup because, like he said, communication is everything. This is your brand. You only get one shot at making an impression with your brand out
That's
there.
right.
So
Yeah.
take it for what it's worth.
Yeah, Steve, I think it's also too your job if you're in a position where you are working in corporate communications. to make the case on behalf of the people you represent in leadership to help them look good, to make them look good. And this is not about saying, oh, you can't use an iPhone and you should go straight to, one of the high end cameras, get a Scarlet,
Yeah, right.
that's not what's being said. You find the right equipment that's appropriate for the moment. And sometimes it may not be the iPhone. It may be the fact you need to buy a light and put it on your CEO and have a microphone in front of them that you can actually hear him with. The basics are they need to be focused, the right color, the right lighting, and you can hear them. And that's where everybody has to start. But YouTube in 2007, even when I was working for that association I was speaking of, began to kind of lower the bar a little bit. People started thinking, hey, it's okay. We can kind of be a little bit more loose, just a little bit. Well, today everybody kind of thinks anything goes, and you can do whatever. You can, but then when other things are done that are really well done, they make you look really bad and everybody knows it. It does work. I mean, in some ways it's an advantage for people that do know how to produce in a meaningful way. But I like what Steve said. He's talking about external antennas do help on the LTE setups. That's a really, really, really cool point. But again, there's so many little choices here. So it depends on what you mean by going into a church or going into, to a room space. I mean, there's a number of things to keep in mind, but I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is number one, do you have the antenna? Do you have the ability to connect using your streaming technology? And then what gear are you bringing and how you going to get that, how you going to capture that from the stage?
Now, do you ever have like I've consulted with different churches in the area as one because I mean I specialize in that area, and one of the things besides the bandwidth because I am in a rural area for all intents and purposes. There's a lot of rural churches that maybe have dial up or a little bit better than dial up. Fortunately, the church that I attend we have cable, so we have a lot better upload and download links. But do you ever go in with them and ask them, like I do after I get the bandwidth information, what's your budget in case they don't have the gear or where they're starting at? Like, are you packaging this up for them? Are they hiring you to come in? Is that something that you set the expectation before you go on site? Or do you just kind of play it by ear and roll with it once you kind of get a little bit of the fundamentals?
Well, I actually do both. I'm a live stream consultant and I also do production. And I mean, I have a meeting right after our show actually with a church that, because of Corona, said, hey, we've been talking about doing this for a while, but we've got to get it going. And so it depends on what they want to do. I mean, I can tell you personally, you probably can figure this out, but I always expect everybody says we have $12 and anything more is a little much. So part of it is education, helping somebody understand what they're investing in, whether it's great equipment, having the ability for peace of mind when you buy a TriCaster or you buy, like I said, one of these other Wirecast gear is a great example. Those type of products will a lot of times eliminate a lot of the fear you've got between a computer that may be herky jerky and the graphics card doesn't really work with the processor the way it should. It's outdated, those kind of things. So I think that for a budget question, I think a lot of times what I try to do is help frame the meaningful potential pitfalls and then say, look, here's a way you can do this. If you're looking to really just start, here's one answer for you. But there's something over here that may be the good, better, best. And I think that's probably the right way to do it because my job is not to oversell anybody on any of this because streaming is like everything in the creative world. There is no set standard price. Everybody's curious what everybody else charges, and yet nobody can give you a mainline kind of a thought. You can ask
Yeah.
Facebook, and it's one guy's saying I'm going to charge $5,000 an hour, and that happened one time in 10 years, so that's now his new limit. Like holding the peaks on a VU meter. But the reality is that I think most people who are reasonable know that in order to really put in an infrastructure that's going to serve them well for a number of years, you've got to make some level of investment. Now that could be for one church or one organization, $5,000. It may be 10,000 on another, but it's so specific. It's a fingerprint because you really, like you said, you look at the room. You go into a room and you want to put in ceiling lighting. That's one cost. If you're going to just put two bathroom stands up and put some lights up, drop a green screen with thumbtacks, you can do that too, and it works just the same a lot of times. But it really just depends.
Well, I think there's a lot to be said with that. Like you said, there's a lot of people that'll charge X amount of dollars, and I'll kind of get to that. But we do want to take this opportunity right now to thank the folks over at Telestream. I mean, they're the reason why we're able to do this show and continue doing it. So we want to invite you guys to head on over to telestream.net/on social and check out Wirecast Studio or Pro. You can get in on this and have the production that we're talking about, whether you're a church, whether you're a school, organization, whatever it is, you want to get out there and get your message out and heard at high quality. Go check it out. There's a free download. I know, Jeff, you and I are big users of the software and the gear hardware. So I mean, we stand behind it, and I know some of the folks in the chat room also do. But I mean, again, going back to quality here, right? You want to step up your production. Wirecast gives you the option to use good cameras as well as your mobile devices. So it's a win-win. So if you're one of those mobile device guys, you have
Yeah, no,
your
there's no
software.
doubt about it. I mean, I approached Telestream because I like the product so well, a couple years ago. And the thing I love about Wirecast, you guys have heard me say this a million times. I love the virtual camera output because right now we're going through a different system. And I have the ability to have this nice look with the chroma key and the nesting and all that kind of stuff wherever I want to send my video. The other thing is I love the chroma key. It's one click and it looks like this. It's pretty good if you got decent lighting and you kind of know a little bit about how to set it up. I think no matter what you're using, I really believe this with all my heart. Learning what you've got is also probably more valuable sometimes than just upgrading. And it's like Photoshop. If you go back and look at all the menus that are in there, you'll inevitably see stuff that you think, I didn't know it did 3D and all this kind of stuff. So, a lot of it is just learning. But hey, I just want to give a quick shout out to Tim Gillette. Steve, now it's a official Blab reunion here today.
Oh boy, here we
Um,
go.
and yeah, I was thinking we need to do that anyway. I've been hearing other people talk like that. And David Brewer, love your question about what about the new 5G? You hear that there are great downloads, and what about the upload? I have no experience in that as of yet. In my area, it has not been deployed. But I would be curious to hear what other people say. George Kennedy may be someone who's had some experience with that. I can't help but think it's going to help. But again, it all comes back to where that point of presence is. The difference with 5G that I understand is that it's not just going to be cell tower based. People are putting in antennas on corners of bakeries. And I've even heard crazy things like antennas in the back of moving cars that will help repeat signals and things along those lines. So I don't know a lot about it, but I think that there's certainly an interesting conversation. And it definitely will be the framework of video streaming. You know, the only flip side of that is that right now I think some of that's unknown in terms of long-term health risk, but
Yep.
it's definitely coming and it's definitely going to benefit streaming.
Yeah, and I guess as we find out more and more, we can let you know and see what it has to say. But George goes on in the chat room. He also says that in 2020, I'm really looking into a bonded system. Hotels and convention centers will tell you that they're giving you 10 megs up, and then you find out that it's DHCP, and you're sharing the same backbone with the entire center or hotel. Production will suffer with the bandwidth fluctuation. And that's one of the reasons, George, that when we go out to conventions, we take the live view, we take the live view solo. We actually talked to the folks on live view a couple episodes ago. If you go back in the archives, we had Greg from live view on. Um, not to put a plug out there, but I mean, we've used them. Telestream's used them. We've used them for years, and I really like their bonded solutions and scenarios, and for that very very thing. And when you go to conventions, Jeff, the the cost surrounding the internet, not just for 10 meg, is uh, it's um, it's atrocious. It's
I have had
terrible.
people the last big conference I did like that. I said I need my own channel, my own internet that's not on the public and no one is sharing it. And it was a $1,500, I think 15 or $1,600 for a 3 hour event.
Wow. That, and I know
But
that's
but
what the
but you're
cost is.
trying to hit 10, 15,000 people, 20,000
Yeah.
people. That's part of the equation, so it has to be there.
I know David's saying he's a 4K streamer. And so, right now that's something, we I don't see the point of streaming 4K at this point, because you got to think about the people that are that are viewing your content. It's one thing to have that, especially if you have an adaptive bit player that will
That's what I was
automatically
thinking.
adjust it, right, with adaptive bit rate like YouTube will do. But not everything um, is centered around that. And that's something I wanted to bring up with this, Jeff, talking about destinations when you're on site and you're working with a church or whatever. Most places, from my experience, they don't want to pay for a CDN. They want something that's free. But then if something like today, LinkedIn is down. I can't connect to LinkedIn for some reason.
Right.
Um, the church isn't going to go to LinkedIn, but they might go to Facebook, and Facebook might have had an API change, or maybe they're working on something, or YouTube, and it's down. and then they start yelling because it's down, and you're like, "Well, you get what you pay for. It's free."
Well, yeah. I mean, you do. I mean, but you would think Facebook being the behemoth that it is actually, invest in some infrastructure and all those things. And I think they've done a fairly good job by and large. I mean, my experience with them has been pretty reliable. But at the same time, I think I mean, that's usually actually, to your earlier point, the second or third question in, which is really how critical is this that it airs, right? The way you want it
Yep.
to. Because if you're mission critical, that means you need to have redundant internet. You need to make sure that you've got, backups on a lot of other pieces of gear. Um, Akamai, are you sending it to a real content delivery system? There's a number of big time questions in there, but usually in that conversation, when you start throwing around what those costs look like for those type of products, people then to say, hey, you know what? We really want this to go out, but if for some rare reason there's a problem, we can probably work around that because you're recording it and we'll post it when it's done. So there's a trade-off. And usually with the clients I'm working with, that's kind of where they fall. They don't want to spend the extra money to really make sure that absolutely that event itself is what they want it to be. Um, and if there's a rare problem, you post that video, you record it locally before it goes out as a stream, and that way you've got it to repost it.
Let me ask you, and chat room, please feel free to chime in before we wrap the show up. I want to get your opinion for those out there that are considering. I've been doing some research on houses of worship, and some houses of worship feel like you know it's it's not important to live stream. They don't think it's an important. It's not something that they should really invest money. They don't have the volunteers. They don't have um, you know, the technology know-how. When you're talking with schools, you're talking with government facilities and places like that. Do you make yourself available to produce this for him at a reasonable rate if they go with you, just so they can dip their toe into finding out why live streaming is important in this era? Um, just to kind of maybe let them see and feel why they need to be doing it.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to do something, especially if you're trying to work above the Craigslist level of where everybody wants you to be.
Exactly.
Last October, November, I had the honor to stream the candidate debates for our board of supervisors here in my county, and I did a series of three of them. I gave them a really attractive price, but without telling them, I just said to myself, I want to dress it up a little bit. I built kind of a nice open that looked like, in some small way like you'd see on like the network news with the flag and all that kind of stuff. And then I put their pictures up, the way it would look. And I was running cable the first stream, and I noticed that all of them were standing around my computer, and I was like, "What are they doing?" And they had saw it because I left it on a loop. I've been looking at it, and I thought, okay, that tells me something non-verbally that it connected with them in a different way because they were like, "Oh my gosh," and it almost made them nervous to be part of this thing. And all it was two graphics that looked halfway decent, right? And so I think there is value in showing a little bit of that because when you cast a vision for somebody and they get it, I really believe they can put a crowbar in their wallet. People will tell you, organizations will tell you they can't afford something. It's not that they can't afford a price, it's that they have not achieved a vision that overcomes what they think that price is going to be worth. Um, the only other example I've got that I think is appropriate. In 1999, I went to work for an internet company called UUNet. At the time, it was the Cadillac of the internet, one of the biggest internet providers in the world. And I was called to do their online training, a brand new video training university. And I said, "Hey, I need a beefy computer to do this. I want to do 3D animation and things like that." And they're like, "Nah, we're not going to do that. Here's your Dell." And so I went home and did it on my home computer, did a little animation of a logo that revealed in 3D and everything. And a week later, I had a $10,000 Dell computer with a $4,000 graphics card. And I always remember that because it wasn't that I did anything, but what happened was they saw a vision of, oh my gosh, okay, we want more of this. It will cost this. And so that's the thing is that it's never about price. It really is never about price. It's about the value you can deliver in a way that people say, gosh, that was actually really good. I'd love to have more of it, right?
Yeah.
And it's hit and miss. I mean, it's not like everything works that way, but
Well, seeing is believing, right? That's for a lot of people. If they can not visualize your vision that you have for it, but then they turn around and see it and they can get on board, like you said, they'll open up the wallet. And I think for those of you out there that are trying to get on-site clients for broadcasting, for streaming, these are things that you show your resume. Don't just hand them a resume and let them see, oh, you can do XYZ. 90% of that, they're going to be like, that's Greek to me. I don't understand. You sit down and you make a production kind of like what we're doing here, and your green screen, chroma key, whatever you're doing, and it looks professional with titles, graphics that work for people, that's going to sell it to them and they won't mind paying. And I think that's the biggest issue
Right.
that I see right now with people saying nobody wants to pay for live streaming. It's because people aren't seeing quality. People just go with it's good enough. And that to me, I see it all over the place. They'll go with it's just good enough until they see what you're doing and then they feel like they got burned because they went with the guy that supposedly was professional, but to you and I,
Can't
he
tell
was
you,
just he
I'm
was
sure
okay.
everybody in the chat I'm sure everybody in the chat who's been around for any length of time has the exact same story. How many people are you getting today as a client that has said, "I've already spent 8,000 or $10,000 on a video by somebody who, I was trying to save money a little bit, but we had to do it over 3 times." And now they're even gun shy about working with you, and it's like, "Listen, that wouldn't have happened had you just
That's
decided,
right.
you know, to spend more." I have a saying that I think actually is pretty accurate, which is, "Don't spend your success trying to save money." That doesn't mean be a bad steward of the resources that are given to you. We're entrusting that with sometimes with the organization, but at the same time, lowballing for the sake of lowballing does nothing. You've got to figure out what level you want to get at, and then you buy toward that level. And I
Yep.
think that's the best way to play that. But
Well, that's something, Jeff, and we'll close up on this. That was one thing. There's a local school here that deals with. Well, actually, I should say it's a school. It's a group that it's like an after-school activities type of place. Like I don't know what you would call it, but it was started nonprofit. And one of the people that run it is a minister, and they came over because they got wind of my setup and everything via my senior pastors, and they said, "Hey, our assistant pastor does this. He does." He works for a software company. He does all this streaming, and they were kind of like, they're like, maybe he can come in and teach some classes on broadcasting live streaming. And they were like, yeah, well, I don't. So they decided to meet. They wanted to come over and check it out. She walked in here and she was just like blown away. She's like, you've got CNN in your basement, in a finished basement. You have CNN, and I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, it's what I do to produce. And I showed her what these shows look like and some of the other ones I do. And I called up Marty on the neural net system, and I had Marty, chatting with her. She was floored that she could not only see high definition video of Marty in his studio, but actually talk to him just like you and I are talking. And I said, well, yeah, you can talk to a chat room too. And she was like, please tell me that you'll come and teach classes. Unfortunately, I don't have the time, but I thought it was interesting to this point, to prove this point. Like, she was unsure until she saw the setup and saw what I was capable of doing and saw
that's right.
the production that was capable. Then she's like, how do I get you signed up? We got to figure out
Well,
a way
that
we can pay you. That was kind of her mentality.
no, I think that's exactly what would happen. I think that there's a misnomer that we use these words streaming like it covers everything. I mean, this
Yep.
is even about culture. I mean, with every one of the major issues we've got of our time, we define people and groups and things and protocols and technologies, all this in one general word, and it doesn't work that way. Streaming is more than mobile streaming. It's more than desktop streaming. It's more than produced virtual live streaming. If you're a service that does it for others, there's a million different ways that works, and that's why there's so much disconnection because people are only going with what they know. And I don't fault anybody for ever not knowing what they don't know. It's not an ignorance issue. It's just that they've not been exposed to something different, a different perspective. And so that's where you as a producer, you as a streamer, you've got to be able to educate somebody, and you also have to be very careful not to take advantage of them just because you want to make some sort of a sell on a certain level. Find the right answer for somebody, present that to them, and stand by that, and hopefully they'll be able to do what you want them to do. And that'll then work great for everybody. You'll get the right reviews and the endorsements you're looking for, and you'll have a much better time the next time you go to stream because you can point to them and say, "Hey, they were really happy with what we did." So
Well, that's just it, guys. I really hope you got a lot out of this. I know it's a half hour. The half hour goes quick. We try to pack as much value and information in here as we can. Um, Send us your topics that you'd like us to discuss. This was one of the ones that we wanted to get into more of the techie side. Once a month, we want to try to get into that and get some more techie stuff down for you guys out there that are trying to make money doing this live stream broadcast, whatever you want to call it, as Jeff said. Um, I think this is beneficial to everybody. So hit that subscribe button. Go to the Telestream Tube YouTube channel, Wirecast Tube. Subscribe to both of those. Go to our social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, you name it. Go like those pages so you can stay up with the latest episodes. We're working on getting this podcasted for those of you that can't be here during the middle of the day, but you still want to catch what we're doing and what we're talking about. 41 episodes in. We're continuing this train. We're going to see how far this train goes, but we really appreciate everybody tuning in. And we want to thank Jeffrey Fitzgerald, I got to get it out one more time,
No, you don't.
the two-time Emmy Award winner.
Hey, after 35 years in media, I'm very happy to win my first. I'll say that. But listen, I'm really excited about the fact Monty and George and Steve, all these other folks we have. Sometimes we
Yes,
see them come and go. I'm really happy to see people that I know are doing great things. I'm just one of the guys. I've never got a microphone I didn't like. You guys know that by now. But I love the fact that we've got a community here where people are able to share great information. And it's not just my story. So if you've got things you want to share with us, we'd love to have you on the show and be able to tell a bigger story. So remember that.
I agree. And just like I told him before, I would take it off his lower third. I took it off his lower third just so he knows that going forward, I will embarrass him too much. But guys, I can't reiterate what Jeff said enough. Please send in your information. You want to be on the show? Do you have a special niche in this social media area that you think that you could be a benefit to our audience? Send an email. StephenH@telestream.net is my email. You can feel free to contact me. If you want to follow me everywhere else on the internet, just like Jeff in High Def, you can find him pretty much everywhere there. I'm the Tech Buzz, so you can find me everywhere you find that name. Just Google it. You'll find me. Guys, I really appreciate it, and we'll see you next week for more on social. Have a great rest of the week.